Well, thanks for joining the Anthony Atiase Experience. My name is Anthony Atiase. I am the host of this podcast, and my guest today is Mr. Eddie Mensah. He's the managing director of the Right to Dream Academy in Ghana, West Africa. So we're definitely excited to have him here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Eddie, what I want to do is I want to take it back. I kind of want to start from the beginning. What was your upbringing like? What was the genesis of Eddie like in the beginning?
So how far are we going? Like my parents met.
Well, let's go to after they met, and then you were a little boy running around.
Right. So I grew up in Tema. Tema is it's a small city, port city, about 45 minutes away from Accra, the capital. My dad was in the army as a teacher, and my mom was a teacher or was a teacher at the time. So I grew up like on an army base, and then we moved to the naval base, which is also in Tema. So my upbringing was basically, you know, you're around educators, right? I walk to school with my mom, come home. My dad's a teacher, and then so I lived in that space until I was 12, and then went to boarding school, which is pretty common at
Yes.
the time,
Yes.
right? The best schools in Ghana are boarding schools. So I went to boarding school in the Volta region called Bishop Herman College, which was unusual if you
Uh-huh.
understand the tribal and language politics of Ghana. So I'm a
Okay.
Fanti, so I'm from the central region of Ghana. So most people traditionally will send their children to schools in the parts of the country where they're from,
Okay.
right? Because then it makes it easier. So Cape Coast is probably where I should have ended up, somewhere in Accra. But my mother said I was too close to my grandmother, and if I went to boarding school in that region, I wouldn't take school seriously. So they sent me to this really good boarding school in the Volta region. Big moment was that my dad passed away a month before I went to boarding school.
Oh
So
wow.
it kind of turned everything upside down because we had to move, and then we ended up moving a lot in those
Mm.
5 years before I got a scholarship to go to school, to finish high school in Canada. So
Wow. Wow.
that's kind of the start
That's
of
how it
of,
started.
of the life. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned boarding school because I went to living in Ethiopia. I went to boarding school in Kenya
Ah,
for a few years. So trust me, I know about boarding school. But it was just a way for my parents to provide us with better
the
education.
best. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
it was school in Kenya. So and it was a great experience. So that
yeah,
was good.
yeah.
So being in Ghana and then. Uh, Once you left Ghana, is that when you went to Canada?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I finished high school. I did 11th and 12th grade in Canada. I did the international baccalaureate
Hmm.
at a school called Pearson College, which is part of the UWCs. The UWCs is a chain of schools, of international schools, England, Germany, Venezuela, New Mexico. There's a chain of those schools. So I went to the one in Canada,
Wow.
finished high school there, and then to Pennsylvania for undergrad.
Wow. So what was it like going to Canada from
Ah,
Ghana? Oh my goodness.
ah, oh my goodness. Well, let's see. So imagine 16.
Yep.
This is early 90s, actually 1990 to be exact. There are no cell phones at the time, right?
Hmm.
I've
Hmm.
never been on a plane. I've never been out of the country. Um, and so I'm supposed to get on a flight from Accra to London, London to Vancouver. And then you get to Vancouver, and it's a very short flight from Vancouver to Victoria. Well, I get to London, and I'm so overtaken by the bright lights that I miss my flight
Oh wow.
to Vancouver. So British Airways officials were really helpful to me. Got me a hotel room because the next flight wasn't till the next morning.
Hmm.
So I had to stay overnight at Heathrow. Had to pull out the books for them to call the school to tell them I wasn't coming. Um, and then it was in October. In October, weather now I know now is pretty mild. Right?
Oh, wow.
But coming from Ghana,
Yeah.
I was I was quite unprepared for how cold it was going to be when I landed in Canada. I was freezing, like shaking. I remember thinking to myself, "There's no way I can live here. I need to
Yeah.
go back. Like I need to find the reason to go back as soon as possible."
Oh my gosh. That-
So it was definitely an adjustment. It all worked out in the end.
yeah. So, and you said you were 16 at the time?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was in London before I came to the States. I was 19. So the school that I was at, which was Richmond International, like I think,
Mm,
no, American International College, which was in Richmond, London,
yeah.
I transferred from there to come to the States.
Mm.
And I was 19 and I missed my flight as well uh, when I was living in London. So it's a whole story. We'll have to talk about another time. But coming
Right.
from London to the States for the first time, and I think my first experience was coming to Knoxville, Tennessee, then to Charlotte, and I was
Uh,
just like, "Oh,
what
America!
is this?
Finally!" it's been a long time coming. Um,
Right.
so being in Canada, were there some challenges that you went through, whether it was language barrier,
Yeah.
whether it was understanding? What were some of the challenges you went through?
I mean, it's funny when I look back now at the things that were challenges. The accent, like just
Oh,
understanding what people are saying,
mm,
was a challenge. So I had a chemistry teacher from India, and for the first 2 weeks, I had no idea what he was saying. My English teacher was Canadian. I had no idea what she was saying. It's an international school, right?
okay.
So I'd found a few Africans that would help me out here and there. And the school had started before I got there, so I wasn't there for orientation. So I felt like I was doing a lot of catch up. The weather, I think my body kind of adjusted really quickly.
Hmm.
Being homesick was not too difficult because I'd been in boarding school before, but just finding my feet in terms of really understanding what was happening around me, people already in rhythm, that took a while. But it was also probably some of the best times
Mm,
of my life because those 2 years I got to meet people from everywhere. I mean, there was a school with over 80 countries represented, right? And
wow.
so you really got a chance to kind of learn about different cultures, learn about yourself and how you see your own culture.
Yeah.
So it was the adjustment, I think, was probably in the first 6 months or so. And then after that, I felt like I was really more in a growth space.
Interesting. So when, like, whether it was during the summer or Christmas, like, what did you do? Did you go stay with
Oh,
some
yeah, host families.
host
So,
family? Yes.
the school, yeah, that experience.
Right. Right. Right.
So the school
Definitely.
had done really well in having a whole bunch of volunteers in the city of Victoria and then outside
Hmm.
of host families that would volunteer to host international students. And if you make good friends with the Canadian student, you could go home with them. I had a couple of friends that invited me over. I
Wow.
remember being in Edmonton during the winter and for a week with a friend and
Yeah.
going out once and saying, "That's it. Nope. Nope.
No.
I'm going to sit here by the fireplace while you guys go skiing.
Go.
And I'm not going out."
Oh
So,
wow.
the school was well set up to provide, support services for students. But it was still a challenge. There's no way you can cover everything that a young, teenager needs when they move to a new country. So there was still a challenge, but it was good to have um, folks who were in similar situation with you,
Hmm.
kindred spirit, and that really helped.
Yeah. When you talk about some of these friends or people that you met that didn't really know you that well, like they,
Mm,
of course, you were in the same school, but the fact that out of the kindness of their hearts, they were like, come stay with us. It just goes to show a lot of times you hear about bad stuff happening in the world, but there's just also a lot of good people out there with good
Yes,
hearts.
yes,
You know,
yes. And my life is littered with good hearts
mm,
of people
yeah,
helping me along the way. Right?
absolutely. Uh,
It's almost like the theme of my life. Because even going to Canada, right? The fact that our headmaster at my boarding school in Ghana picked me out of all the students to go and take this exam. Obviously, I was doing well in school, so that helped,
Right,
right?
right.
But he could have picked somebody else. I don't know.
Wow.
But he saw something in me that he picked me to do that. We took the exams. I did very well, but there was an interview process in which we were looking at what your character would be
Mm,
like, what your resilience would look like, and so I was favored enough,
yes.
right, to be in Canada where people out of the blue volunteer to support you and help you along the way.
Yeah.
I think it's something to be really grateful for.
No, absolutely. And I think also just the energy that you give, you're definitely gonna get that back from
Wow.
other
Yep.
folks as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, that's great. So then you went to why Pennsylvania? What made you pick that?
I don't really. People don't believe me when I tell the story. There was a brochure of Franklin and Marshall College, right? So I'd applied to a bunch of universities, and a couple of them had done like early decision. I wasn't going to get in, so I won't mention the schools that rejected me because I'm all
Yeah,
over it
put it to the
now.
side. Yeah.
So towards the end of the application period, Franklin and Marshall brochure was left in the student common area, and I saw a soccer pitch, and I was like, oh, they have a soccer team, so maybe I should try and apply there. And then one of the college counselors said, well, I was going to suggest it to you before, but you had your list already. So in
Wow.
those days they had the common application, so I
Yeah.
could just photocopy my common application and push it off to Franklin and Marshall. And it was the only school that gave me enough money to go.
Wow.
Um, and I was like, okay, I don't know where Franklin and Marshall is. Even today, right? When you say you went to Franklin and Marshall, people say, you mean Franklin College or
Yeah.
Marshall?
Right.
No, it's
No,
Franklin and
Franklin and
Marshall
Marshall.
in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, one of the
Oh,
top liberal arts
wow.
schools. Yeah,
So you went to school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
that's right. That's where I did my
It's
undergrad
it's
before grad
so
school.
crazy. I just listening to your story and some of the similarities. So my sister and my two sisters and my brother went to the Lancaster Mennonite
Lancaster
uh,
Mennonites,
school
yeah.
there. Yeah, so they went there, and then on the weekends they would stay with a host family. So
Mm,
yeah, they were in Lancaster for
wow.
it was actually high school. So yeah, it
Oh,
was yeah. So they would go during
oh,
the it was interesting during the week they would stay on campus, and on the weekends they would stay with a
that's
family.
amazing.
So I
I
used to
know
go up there and
Lancaster
visit.
Mennonites very well
Yeah.
because I played soccer. So in the summer, I'd try and play in soccer camps. They had a coach named Rice. That's his
Mm,
last name. I don't remember his first name.
okay.
And his sons played on a club team in the summer, so I played with them, and
Wow.
so I knew Lancaster Mennonite when I was in college. I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time there.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, my brother played
Yeah.
soccer for them
Oh,
for
okay.
a number of years, and then he got a partial scholarship when he transferred to Winthrop here in
Ah,
yeah. So it was definitely an experience because it's just the way the town was set up. It was like, okay, this is different.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But they
Not
had
the
a nice
America I was
outlet.
expecting.
Yeah, no, it was definitely different. When I would go visit them, I was like, oh, okay, it's Amish land.
This is
But it was different. But they had an excellent outlet up there that I used to
yes,
go and
yep.
visit.
The
Yeah,
outlet
yeah.
malls, yeah.
Small world. So college, um, Was that experience, I mean, being in Pennsylvania, different from Canada? Was pretty much the same? How are the people like?
Yeah, I think Canada was a bit of a bubble,
Hmm.
because you were with the same group of 200 people, for those 2 years. You develop really really deep bonds,
Hmm.
and then college is a little bigger. It's almost like the real world, which
Yeah,
it's not.
yeah.
I look back now and I'm like, oh, I went to a small college, 3,000 people,
Oh
but
wow.
at the time, coming from 200 to 3,000 felt like a whole new world.
Wow.
Um, and it's Lancaster, Lancaster in the 90s. I know it's a little better now.
Right, right.
Lancaster in the 90s was pretty dry.
Oh goodness.
So again, you are into a whole new transition, trying to find your feet, and trying to find your feet in a space and a school and a country that goes at a really fast pace
Hmm.
and doesn't really wait for you. That's
Hmm.
how I felt in college, right? Like, okay, I gotta find a way to keep up with the pace,
Wow.
and then find my own rhythm. Um, but it was, I enjoyed college. I really did. Um, my sophomore year was hard because my mom was getting sick in Ghana, and I
Okay.
couldn't afford to come back, so that was a hard year. But most of the 4 years that I felt like I was kind of beginning to come into my own
Hmm.
and have a little bit more confidence in who I was, which I think was again the circumstance forces you to do that, but then the
Yeah.
people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And so, I still have friends from those days to today. I
Wow.
still have friends from school when I went to school in Canada today.
Wow.
So having the right people around you, I think is really important.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Um, and I want to come back to that. When did you see your mom? Like, did it was how many years was it before you saw her? Did she come visit?
4 years. It was 4 years
Wow.
of university before I could. Actually, no, it turned out to be 5 because I got a job
Hmm.
right after college to sort out my visa,
Yeah.
to get a work visa, and then I came to Ghana. She couldn't get the visa to come to my graduation,
Wow.
so she wasn't at my graduation. It was a year after I graduated that I came to Ghana to see her. So
It is so hard for people to even fathom the fact that it was that number of years waiting to see your mother. I think it was probably 8 or 9 years for me that I didn't see my mom. So
right, yeah,
now I think back, I'm like, I can't believe it. You know, it's hard to believe that
right.
it was 8 or 9 years, and then she finally came here, and that's when
Wow.
yeah, I saw them, and you know, and I'm trying to even think. I don't even know whether it was a hug or maybe it was a handshake. I don't know how you do
Mm,
it.
mm, right?
You
Like,
know,
how do you connect? How do you relate?
right. So it was definitely it was interesting. You talk about having the right people around you, which I think is so important. How do you like pick through that and just
Mm,
because you have a choice of who's going to be around you, and sometimes
oh,
people pick the wrong people. So
that's
so
right.
at a young age, did you always have that to pick the right people around you?
Oh, I think it's a combination of faith and luck,
Hmm.
right? So, like, faith is a big part of my life journey, and I say faith instead of Christianity because I feel like I've gone through the phases of Christianity,
Right.
where I was really deeply fundamental, and then I was questioning church, and then I landed on just having a strong relationship with God.
Yeah.
But part of it is that if you pay attention to your own inner self,
Hmm.
then you can see if you and somebody connect. Like, remember the first time you and I spoke, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right? It's like,
Yep.
okay, this person's spirit and my spirit vibe,
Yeah.
are they genuine? Right? And then, we don't have to actually specifically say, hey, we're vibing. You can
Right.
just feel it,
Feel it.
right?
Right. Right.
And then there's a certain nice, like, it's not stressful when you find the right person.
That, you know what? That is a really great point. It is not stressful because
Right?
when someone in your circle is just every time it's just
Yeah.
stressful.
I have people like that, right? It's not their fault or my fault. We're just
Right.
different,
It's just
right? But
different.
he's in my circle, and I'm like, this guy.
Oh gosh, that is so true.
But the right
Um,
people, they're not
yeah.
stressful. You you feel connected, like you want to give to them in
Hmm.
the same way that they want to give to you in all kinds of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. So now you were in college. Did you always want to be an educator, or was how did you? Well,
Oh
obviously
man,
your
I was
folks
talking
were.
to
So
students. I was talking to a couple students last week about this. There's so many things I wanted to be, uh, and teacher was the bottom of the list.
oh, really?
you know, um, I wanted to be a professional footballer, a professional soccer player. That
Uh
was
huh.
like my thing growing up.
Yeah.
And then I abandoned that. And then Ghana school made me think I wanted to become a doctor
Mm.
because we're really bright in school. They put you in the science classes, and your mates are all on the science track. So I actually started off as a bio major in
Wow.
college. I was pre med, and then I switched to econ because I realized I was actually enjoying that a lot more. So, so even as an econ major, at one point I was considering going into like, business consulting and all of that. But my junior year, I started tutoring at Lancaster Country Day School,
Okay.
um, just as a thing to do. And I was like, I really like this. Like, it's really like I'm coming alive in those moments, right?
Right.
So that's really what. So my mom was like, "No, don't become a teacher. There's no money in it. It's not." like to do. So I was like, you know what? I'll do for a couple years more, and then we'll see. Maybe I'll get back into. So I looked for jobs in that way, and I got a teaching job, and the rest is history, as they say. It was
Wow.
like this is what I'm supposed to be doing
Wow. Wow.
regardless of how lucrative it is. This is what I'm supposed to be
This is what
doing.
it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
So you had that spark in you. How did you know? I mean, you enjoyed it, but how did you know it wasn't just temporary enjoyment? Like, how do you know?
yeah.
Like, okay, this is it.
I didn't.
Mm.
I didn't know. I can claim all wisdom now and be like, oh yeah, and then the light bulb and then a trade or whatever,
Right.
it was
Right.
revealed. No, I didn't know.
Mm.
I was just like going with the flow. Like I'm really enjoying this. I like teaching. I got to coach. I got to play. I was playing second division
Hmm.
in Delaware. I was teaching during the day. I got to coach the high school team. Like I was having fun,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I didn't know that this is what I was supposed to be doing.
Wow.
So after 5 years of teaching in a private school in Philly, I got a job with a nonprofit called Stepping Stone. I was like an educational nonprofit that was working with kids from some of the hardest parts of Philadelphia, trying to help them to get into stronger educational environments. So I became program director for that, and it exposed me to a whole different side of America, right? Like the real educational divide that's usually along racial lines in America, as you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
became really stark. So I really got involved in that, and I started thinking, this is what I should be in this space where I'm helping other people along their journey,
Yeah.
because that's what was done for me by
Wow.
other people, right? You know, I've been on scholarship in school since I was 12. So if I'm in a space where I'm able to help other people along their journey, I should take that seriously. So then it actually kind of started becoming like, okay, this is a career that I should think about. but I still wasn't thinking about, most recently I talk a lot about finding your purpose
Yeah.
and what you're supposed to be doing. I didn't think of it that way. It was just like, this is really good, and this is really taking up like my life. Like I'm dedicating all of my time to it. The families that we're working with are becoming my family, that kind of thing, right? Um, but I don't think in those times, in those younger days, I was thinking of it as, oh, this is my calling. I don't know
Wow.
about it.
Okay.
I think that part came later over time
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
little bit more maturity.
Well, no, that's really amazing. Just you know, feeling that this was something that was in your heart and you were doing,
Mm,
and it doesn't seem like you think of teachers and educators in general, and we talk about them getting paid more than they're getting. So
right.
money was not leading you.
Mm, mm,
It was more
right.
so about this is just something that you wanted to make a difference. Well, and like you said, it was pretty eye opening seeing what was going on the
Yeah.
other side,
Yeah.
from educational perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were in the nonprofit, doing some work. How did you get from? Was it from the nonprofit that you came to Charlotte, or what was that path?
Yeah. Yeah. So I did my master's while at a nonprofit. And then about 13 years in, I was getting like emotionally drained and
Mm,
I was getting really tired. So I was like, okay, but I still like the field of education. So I was exploring. Charlotte was kind of, I say accidents, but there are no accidents, right?
right. Yeah.
So when I was playing, we used to play against Charlotte Eagles when I was in
Oh,
Delaware.
okay.
I'd come to Charlotte a couple times, and I was like, "Oh, I like this city." Right. So when I started looking for jobs, um, and at the time, me and my current wife,
Hmm.
she hates when I say that. Me and my wife were
Yeah.
dating at the time, and we were kind of broken up. And I was like, I'm gonna get away from her and get away from Philly. So I was actually looking for jobs outside of Philly,
Okay.
and Charlotte Prep just came up on the radar, and I thought I did well in the early stages of the hiring process, and they were gonna fly me to Charlotte for a couple days for an interview, and I was like, cool, I love Charlotte, free trip. I
Yeah.
don't know much about the school.
Right.
Worst case scenarios, I got a couple days in Charlotte,
Right.
you know, and I'll go back to Philly because there's a couple other opportunities in other cities that are really the ones that I'm looking at. But I'll
Hmm.
use Charlotte for practice. That was my
That's
that was
great.
my idea. I'll go to Charlotte Prep. I'll enjoy the time, and then I'll come back, and then I'll look at the other places quite seriously.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
I talked to the head of the school at the time for about an hour and a half on the phone, and it was supposed to be a 30-minute conversation.
Wow.
And he's still one of my mentors now, right? And I was like, okay, this is odd. And then I got there and spent 2 days, um, and I was at the airport on my way back to Philly when he called to offer me the job.
Wow.
And I was
Wow.
like, and like, when
Yeah.
I got to the school, I was like, yeah, I want to be here. Like,
Yes.
this really fits my personality.
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't even get back to Philly when he called to offer me the job.
Called to offer you the job.
And I said yes. I hadn't even seen the, he told me the number obviously, but I hadn't seen the full contract. I was like, yes, yes. And then within the day, I was signed up to come to Charlotte. So
Wow.
that's how I ended up in Charlotte. So I came as a middle school head first before I became the head of school.
The
When
head
the
of
same
school.
guy who hired me, when he left, it's his place that I took.
So that's such a great story.
Yeah.
Um, so when you did come to Charlotte, and what has been the transition for you coming to a new space? I mean, you went to Canada, you went to Philly. Were you kind of used to it by now, just coming into this new space? Like you just
Yeah.
yeah,
It's almost like it's a playbook, right?
right, right.
We're
You
moving
know,
again. So
moving
you
again.
get there, you find your comfort things, right?
Hmm.
So I have things that I look for. I get to a new place. Where's soccer happening?
Okay.
Where are the soccer teams? Is there any good Ghanaian restaurants? Um, where are the Africans gathering?
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Like there's just a few. I like a nice cozy apartment.
Hmm.
Neighborhoods really doesn't matter to me. I can live in any neighborhood,
Yeah,
right? So there's just a few little like comfort things that you look for, and then you start to find like I realize that I don't need to be sociable with everybody. I
yeah,
just need two, three folks that are my people,
hmm,
and then I'm good,
yeah,
right? In any
yeah.
space that I get to. So that's kind of. I don't think I was doing any of this consciously, by the way. You're asking me the question now, so I'm reflecting.
Right.
It's kind of like right. It's a natural. I move a lot, so you get there, and then instinctively I look for those things, and then once they're in place, I'm good.
So I feel like when you were younger, in that period where you're moving, kind of started to prepare you for
Yeah.
for for when you're older, and just
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
moving as well. Um, so Charlotte private school came to Charlotte, and then you were initially head of middle school,
Yeah.
and then of course you became head of just the head of the school in general. How important is mentorship for you?
Huge. Huge. So I mentioned Blair, the guy who hired me, and then
Hmm.
I ended up being um, his successor. Big important mentor for me. I have a couple other people in Philadelphia, um, and then in my later years, I started mentoring other people,
Mm.
and I realized that I was also getting a lot out of mentoring folks. Right, so sometimes before I got wiser, and I'm still on my way, I thought of mentoring as a very unidirectional feeding, right? I
Hmm.
go to the guru, my mentor, with my issues, and they help me sort through them. Um, but a lot of the mentors that I've had will make it an exchange, and so I realized that when I started mentoring people with the same kind of methodology, I'm gaining a lot from the people I mentor as much as the people that mentor me.
Mm.
So it's a circular thing and an exchange rather than somebody has all the wisdom and I go and I collect some and then I
Yeah.
pass it on to somebody. But there's a real exchange there. But I think
Wow.
it's so key for they say that identity is complex. It's based on how you see yourself or how other people see you.
See you. Right.
And mentors, either the folks that I mentor or the people that mentor me, are
Hmm.
really good mirrors for me, um, to be able to be reflective, uh, but also they're really good models for me to
Yeah.
see. I like I like the way Anthony is. I want to be like that.
Right.
Like I don't
Right.
want to be Anthony, but I like this part of him, and
Yeah.
I like that part of Blair, and I like that part of John, and then take all of that and grow from it.
Wow. Um, so you were at this great school in a great position, something that people strive to be at,
Uh-huh.
and then you made this change
This
where
ridiculous change.
I remember what you told me. I was like, "What? You doing where? Going where?" So tell us about this decision and change that you made. That is just something that.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Wow. So I'm still processing myself. how
Right.
that whole thing came about. But Right to Dream is a football academy. It's a football soccer for American audiences. Based in Ghana, an hour away from where my mother lives. Has a really strong academic program, a really strong character education program, and a really strong football tradition. Like, we had 8 players in the World Cup playing for 2 different countries, Denmark
Wow.
and Ghana, right? So this is like, if I think about the trajectory of my life in terms of being a soccer player, you know, getting degrees in education, really concerned about justice and how to help folks who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity. Having a yearning for Ghana, my mother is getting older.
Mhm.
Um, so when the call came and said, "Are you interested in doing this?" I was like, it's been 28 years at that time of being away from Ghana. Like,
Mm.
how am I? I come to visit. You come for
Yeah.
2, 3 weeks, maximum a month.
Yeah.
You're on vacation mode,
Yes.
right? You're not living in real Ghana. But then I thought I would regret not doing it.
Mm.
Like, and if I didn't do it because of all the doubts that I had, and I had lots of them, right, about whether this is going to be worth it, huge pay cuts, right,
Mhm.
away from the comforts of America, I'm not
Mhm.
close to retirement. Like, my own family had the same reaction. You are like,
Yeah.
what? What do you mean?
Yeah.
What are you coming here for? Um, but there was such a strong part of me that thought, if I don't do it, it was always hang on the back of my head. I will
Yes.
always wonder
Yes.
what would it have been like to give it a shot. So I thought
Mhm.
I'd come. So I had to convince the wife a little bit, but she wasn't too hard to convince. My stepdaughter, we had talked about wanting for her to have like an international experience.
Mhm.
And so this was also a great opportunity for her because we could come to Ghana and she go to there's an American school, Lincoln, that she goes to, which is really diverse with
Yeah.
people from all over the world. Um, so I was like, you know, let's take a nice, scary, really scary leap of faith and see what happens.
Wow.
Um, and so far, so good. It's been extremely stressful, but extremely enjoyable
Wow. Wow.
simultaneously.
It's almost I think like you mentioned, it's almost full circle here.
Mm,
All these aspects you talked about, with football, the educational piece, changing people's lives, being close
mm,
to your mother. It's really and not being led by the financial piece,
right,
and just and then leaning on your faith in yourself.
right, yeah, yeah,
It just all kind of came together for where you are now. So I just think it's so inspiring just to
yeah,
let folks know that if you feel that in your heart and your spirit,
mm,
then you take that take make that jump.
right,
Um,
right,
I was at a men's retreat this past weekend, Bible group men's retreat, and one of the things the pastor talked about is he'll only add to things that bring a quality or enhance the quality of his life.
mm,
So he'll do things that enhance the quality of your life. And
right,
and 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 you're right. It would have been something that you could possibly regret, just not making that leap
right,
of
yeah,
faith. So that's awesome. So now that you're in Ghana, and you are experiencing it for the almost 3 years,
yeah,
what would you, when you look back, what would you say to someone who's just kind of stuck or trying to decide
mm,
whether to make a choice or make a change like you did?
yeah. Wow. Get some therapy.
That's a good start. Oh
And
gosh.
I mean it literally and figuratively. Like
Right.
a good a good reflection, really searching deep
Mhm.
within yourself, I think is extremely helpful. If you're spiritual, then really connect with the divine in
Yeah.
whichever way that you see it. Because I believe that our, our purpose becomes really clear when you're properly aligned with the divine, right? Like
Yes.
when I'm really like in my good space spiritually, things become clearer for me,
Mm.
what I'm supposed to do. Um, but also just fully accept that you're not in charge of how the thing is gonna go.
That's a
I
good
don't know
one.
how to explain it.
No,
So
you're
at
right.
the beginning of this, you use the word testimony, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's such a good word. Because in the testimony, it's not what you did. It's not what I did. Right? We don't go to church to testify about what we did.
Right. Right.
Right? The
Yeah.
testimony is about what God did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there has to be some really good psychological surrender to
Mm.
say, okay, I'm going to take this step or that step. Um, but there are things that are going to direct how these things go that are not fully in my control. So, what are the things that I can really affect? My attitude, my work ethic, right, my integrity, whatever it is that you can see that's within your area of control. You focus on that, and then the rest, let faith lead the way. But you have to have the courage to lean into the things that are really speaking to you.
Mm.
You have to you know do it in spite of the fear. It sounds so cliche, right? But
Yeah.
do it in spite of whatever fear that you're going. And then
Yeah.
if you can really start to fear less and be led less by fear and more by what you're seeing as your purpose, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes you would do it out of just some, unspoken fear, like thing that's always underneath there. When in reality, that's fake. It's not telling. It's right. It's primordial. It's not what God means for you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
really tapping into. So when I said therapy, I didn't mean it literally, but it's that it's that process of
Yeah.
just have the courage to go through it and reflect on yourself and find what your what your purpose is, and then lean into it.
Hmm.
Because if it is what you're supposed to do, it will work out.
Yeah.
Whether the
Yeah.
money is good or not good or whatever, right? So, I'm not led by money, but I'm also not, ignorant of the fact that the world, the physical world that we live in, requires
Right.
economics to work out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you still have to be aware of all those things,
Exactly.
and your responsibilities and all of that. But I think if you really are tapping into what you believe your purpose is, it works out.
Yeah. No,
That's
that
a very
was
long, convoluted answer
no.
to
It
your
was great. It was great. I
question.
love what you said about aligning yourself and putting God first. That's when you really start to um, feel that purpose that's within
Mhm.
you
Right.
start to come out. So no, that is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate this conversation with you.
Yeah.
It's inspiring and it's interesting. There were so many little things that were such similarities.
I
Just
know
those similarities, but
that we never
uh,
talked about.
exactly, and also I think what you talked about the mentorship and and the good people that are out there
Mm,
in the world
mm,
and if we start to focus on that versus the separation and making it seem like oh everybody's
mm.
bad but
Man, that's a
the
whole podcast we could do
right
on that.
exactly it really is Well, I appreciate it, as I mentioned, and I just wish you luck in all you do, and
Oh,
you
thank you,
continue to
brother.
change lives, and I think
Yes.
it's super important.
All right. Well, I'm happy to do it. I can't wait to see you at Christmas.
Yes, yes, I will
Cool
definitely be
stuff.
there Christmas, and I just would love to just connect, hang out, and
Yeah, that'd
further
be great.
our conversation, where I'm sure we'll find even more similarities.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well,
Uh,
greetings to the wife and child, and will not even child. She's how old
Same
now?
to
Like,
you. Yeah, I know.
you know.
Same
But
to you. Yeah.
appreciate it, and we'll definitely see each other soon. I know.
Sounds good. Sounds
All
good.
right.
All
Take
right.
care.
It's good to see you. All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.